Hi everyone, good afternoon and assalamu alaikum. Thank you for watching The Perspective, نقطئہ with Ovais Iqbal on GEO TV. National Council of Canadian Muslim, NCCM, held its 2021 Ontario Advocacy Day on November 22nd in Toronto, where NCCM proposed a legislation called Our London Family Act to combat Islamophobia. And I had the honor, the opportunity to be there as one of the delegates, where the delegates from all across Ontario were invited to represent the wider spectrum of Canadian Muslims. In today's show, the goal is to bring you the summarized details of this proposed legislation and what to expect next. And for this, I have a pleasure of having Mustafa Farooq, who is the CEO of NCCM, with me here this afternoon, and Doly Begum, who is the NDP's MPP from the riding of Scarborough Southwest. So I welcome both of you to the show.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Thank you so much for having us.
Awesome. So Mustafa, I will come to you first. I was there myself. Thank you very much for the invitation. And obviously you could not invite, a lot of people there because of the setting, but we had the opportunity to meet with the ministers, to meet with the governing party, meet with all the other party members, which we are going to talk about. But what can you tell us? Tell the audience, the viewers, because not many people could be there. What is this legislation all about, and how it's going to help combat Islamophobia?
Sure. So, first of all, by the way, before I say anything else, I first want to say a big thank you to you, Ovais, for hosting this, and I also want to say a big thank you as well to MPP Doly Begum, who of course has been there, and it's always, whenever anyone needs to have a conversation with her, is always available to have that conversation and standing up for her local constituents, and of course those who are not her constituents, and advocating for justice. And so I want to thank you. And also, I made both of them very late because of meetings that I had on Parliament Hill. So I want to express my sincere thank you and apologies as well to both as well. But now to dive right in. We all watched horrified when we had the Quebec City Mosque shooting. Then we were horrified again on September 12th, 2020, when there was the killing at the IMO Mosque. Then we had to stand and be horrified once again in London earlier this year, when a person mowed down a family because they were Muslim. That day we saw all of our political leaders at the provincial level come to London and say clearly that we needed to see not just words, so they weren't just promising words, but they were promising action. And now is the first time that we're starting to see action, because Canadian and Ontario Muslim leaders and folks came together, communities came together to say, we need to see change. They came down to Queen's Park and they advocated. And let me tell you this, political leaders are hearing your call. And that's why we've been very proud to see people like Leader Andrew Horvath, and by the way, Doly, who did a tremendous amount of work on this, stand up and say, we are going to bring forward what we're calling the Our London Family Act. Now, the Our London Family Act is a model piece of legislation, and what it brings forward are the changes that we know that all of you are asking for. It brings forward changes to our education system to address how we deal with Islamophobia in education. It deals with the way that hate crimes are being looked at and dealt with, and how there's accountability in that process. It makes sure that we're recruiting more Muslims into the public sector and more diverse communities. It makes sure that white supremacist groups can't rally outside our masajid in the way that we've seen them do, and many other important kinds of changes. These changes, by the way, we've been very proud to see, and I think Doly will tell us more about the status of the legislation that we've worked in partnership and bringing forward. But I can tell you this, that now other parties are jumping on board. We've seen the Liberal Party now commit to jumping on board with this. We've seen the Green Party commit to jumping on board. We've seen the current government with Minister Gill commit to working with NCCM and with other stakeholders on bringing change to combat Islamophobia. This is where the leadership of our community is critical. We need to see thousands of you push to make sure that this law is not only introduced, as I know it will be in February, but that it is passed, and it is passed before the spring election. we have a unique chance to do this. Let's make it happen.
Very good. Thank you for summarizing this for us. Doly, I'll come to you. You know, post the National Action Summit, which we saw a few months ago, you know, people always look for concrete steps. And this is where NCCM has proposed this legislation. And when I was there and when the delegates were there, we saw the government ministers were there. You were there. Your party leader, Andrea Horwath, was there. And we interacted with all of them. And looks like we had the overwhelming, you know, support for this legislation. So can you help us, first of all, tell us, you know, are we reading it right? The overwhelming support, is this for real? And how NDP plans to bring this bill or legislation to the Ontario Parliament come February?
Well, first, thank you very much for hosting us. As Mustafa was saying, the amount of work that went into this is recognized when you know, channels like yours and the work that you do, it's reflected, and I really appreciate all of you for coming for the lobby day, coming to lobby the MPPs and make sure that we're listening to the concerns that you have. I'm also really honored to be able to work with a team of caucus members who took the concerns very seriously. And let me start off by saying, no one should be scared to walk on the street wearing a hijab. My mother wears a hijab, and sometimes I have felt that fear myself, or you know, whatever religious outfit that they want to wear. And we need a province where Fayez Afzal, the son, the sole survivor from the attack in London, and the next generation of Muslims and all the children and families can live without the fear, regardless of their religion they practice or the clothes or the color of their skin. And this bill is, I think, a step forward in making sure that we create a province that is more tolerant and more accepting. I'm really grateful to see the amount of work that NCCM and Brother Mustafa has put forward to bring this together, and the Muslim community really kind of came together after what happened. And it's not just 2021. Mustafa already talked about the other incidents as well. I hear it all the time in the local mosques. All of that has been put together and in a really good concrete form of recommendations that we can actually implement in Parliament. And one of the things we heard during the lobby day was that we have to make sure that there is a component of education, because if you look back at what happened in London, the fact that there was a 19-year-old who went out and did something like that shows that there is something inherently wrong with our system, with our education system in our province, and that we have to combat. And I think the amount of support we have to make sure that we come together to combat that, to combat white supremacy and stop Islamophobia and all forms of hate crimes is a step forward. This is something that's going to be put into a bill, which is a legislation that will be tabled in early February. Unfortunately, we're coming to a close right now for the Christmas and the holiday season session. So tomorrow is the last day for Parliament, and after that, we're back on February 22nd, I believe. And as soon as we're back, we're actually going to table it. So the Ontario NDP will be tabling the bill, and we're obviously working in partnership with NCCM. And the other thing that we have done already, which is the leader of the official opposition, Andrea Horwath, the leader of the NDP, has written to the leaders of the other party, and that includes the Liberal, the Green, as well as the governing Conservative Party. And we have gotten really good response from others as well. So we want to make sure that this is not a partisan issue. This Islamophobia, combating hate crimes, this is not a partisan issue. We can tackle it in a way where all parties come together and address this issue together. We would love it if others jump in and support the bill and expedite it so we can actually pass through the different stages. So there's obviously the first reading when you table the bill, and then there's the second reading when the bill is being debated. And then after that, if that passes, it goes to committee, from which you can have community members come in and do deputations, do presentations, and make it, even improve it. And if there's anything else that they want to talk about, have those dialogues, and then it comes back to third readings. All of those different stages can actually happen really quickly if we have the government support. And that is really crucial because we have seen other legislations pass through really fast. So I'm hopeful that that is very, very much possible. So that's just kind of a snapshot of what.
going to take a break here, and once we come back from the break, Doly, thank you very much for walking us through the process. But the question is, the elections are on June 2nd. Do we have enough runway? And you said if government's will is there, which we saw at least at the advocacy day when we met with the Education Minister Stephen Lache, we met with Parm Gill, we met with a bunch of other ministers and member of parliaments from the governing party. And looks like there is enough will to have this legislation or bill passed. And also we would want to know, is there any politics at play? Who's going to, get the credit if NDP is presenting this bill? So we will ask these questions after the break. Please stay with us.
कढ़ाई खानी हो तो सिर्फ कराची की, मसालों से भरी हॉट एंड स्पाइसी सी, कबाब हो बिहारी और निहारी भी, उफ तो फिर मजा आ जाए। कढ़ाई पॉइंट सबको जाना है, कढ़ाई पॉइंट पे ही खाना है। कढ़ाई पॉइंट बिरयानी आ जाए हाथ रुकते नहीं, बटर चिकन से मेरा दिल भरता नहीं, लाहौरी चने और गरम गरम नान, दिल बोले ब्रिंग इट ऑन। कढ़ाई पॉइंट सबको जाना है, कढ़ाई पॉइंट पे ही खाना है। कढ़ाई पॉइंट।
हमारा रवैया और तर्ज अमल दोनों जन्म लेते हैं हमारे एहसासात और जज्बात से, जो वजूद पाते हैं हमारी सोच और नुक्ता नज़र से। मुस्बत सोच रखना और हर मामले में नुक्ता फहम होना बनता है बाइस इंसानों और माशरों के दरमियान अच्छे बाहमी ताल्लुकात का और अदम बर्दाश्त का। तो आइए शामिल हो जाएं मुस्बत सोच के इस सफ़र में। देखिए प्रोग्राम नुक्तः नज़र ओवैस इकबाल के साथ सिर्फ GEO TV पर।
Are you purchasing a new home, looking to get a new mortgage, or renewing your existing mortgage? Kamran Qureshi is here to guide you through the mortgage approval process to get you the lowest available rates in the market. Kamran specializes in residential mortgages for primary or investment properties, refinancing for debt consolidation, serving the community for 17 years. For best mortgage rates and trusted advice, call Kamran Qureshi today at 647-280-6663.
Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us after the break. And today we are talking about the proposed legislation by NCCM, which is the London Family Act. And we have Mustafa Farooq, CEO of NCCM, and we also have a pleasure of having Doly Begum, who is the MPP from Scarborough Southwest from NDP. So Doly, before going to the break, you were walking us through the stages and the steps of the bill approval process. The question is, the election is around the corner. So between February and June, do you think that it can be passed?
I absolutely believe that it can be passed. I think there is really, really great opportunity for the government right now to make sure that, and to show the province that we're not just, kind of showing the sentimental value and saying the words, saying the right words, but there is real concrete action. And we have a bill ready that's going to address what the community has brought, what the Muslim community, what the NCCM is recommending, and we can absolutely make sure that we can get this through the legislation.
Very good. Mustafa, what do you think? I mean, at the lobby day, the advocacy day, it was writing on the wall that every party was there and they want to support this bill, and it looked like no-brainer that it will pass. Do you have any doubts? Do we need to do any more influencing?
1000%. Let me be very clear. This is not going to pass. We're not going to see the change that we need to see unless we keep the momentum up, unless we keep the fight up. And so, we have again, the Liberal Party is now supporting what the NDP will put forward. The Green Party will support what the NDP will put forward. There's clear unanimity, and for sure, And the government is committed to saying that we want to work together on making this happen. But let me be very clear. We have heard these promises about things getting changed many, many times. We all know this in the Muslim community. We've heard them tell us 1,000 times that things are going to change. Until I see it done, I will not trust anyone. And so I want to be very clear here. What I need everyone to be doing from now until the introduction of this bill and until the bill is passed is once a week, and this is all I'm asking for. Once a week, I want you to pick up the phone and I want you to call your local MPP and say, we need this to get done across the province every single day. And I will need you to, when you make that one phone call, that should take literally 2 to 3 minutes out of your day every week. At the same time, I want you to take another 2 minutes and I want you to ask a family member or a friend that you don't know to take 2 minutes out of their week, call your local MPP and just ask one question. Are you going to support the Our London Family Act being passed? That's it. And this is something that I need everyone to do from now until it happens, because we need them to see that it's not going to be enough for you just to stand up and say we oppose Islamophobia. We need you to actually make sure that action is passed, and this is how we're going to measure whether you're keeping to your word.
Very good. And Mustafa, can you also give me a little bit more insight? People, those who are watching and those who heard about this proposed legislation, assuming that this legislation passed in February, March, April timeframe, then are we done with combating Islamophobia? Is it, or it's just the beginning of this journey?
I don't think it's the end at all. This is an important step. If this is passed, this would be one of the largest pieces of omnibus legislation tackling Islamophobia in North America, and it should be that, because Canada has faced more killings motivated by Islamophobia than in the last 5 years at a mass scale than any other country in the G7. And so we do need to see very important systemic change here. But this is, again, one step. And again, this only will affect provincial jurisdiction. It will not affect federal or municipal jurisdiction either. This is an important step, and we need to work together to see it pass.
It's an important and one of the great stepping stones. So, Doly, do you see any pushback or any sort of concerns or questions that you might be hearing either from your party or other MPPs or from the other party when it comes to even calling this act as our London Family Act, or the whole idea of this legislation?
Well, first, let me just say that I think that the title is it's so fitting. It's perfect for what we have faced, and it's a way to commemorate really the London family that we have lost. And I don't see any problem with anybody in this province who should see this as a problem. It would be very unfortunate for us to face any sort of hurdle with that. But I do want to make sure that I highlight one thing, which is Brother Mustafa pointed out very clearly, is that when we go through the bill, for example, there is a tendency for a government to kind of pause things if they don't want to. And like you said, there's an election coming up, which means Parliament will adjourn before June. And that means if we don't go through the different stages, the bill can die halfway or just kind of stop there. And then once the House rises or it adjourns, then the bill is done. That we cannot let that happen. We just cannot let that kind of go away, especially after the amount of work that the community put together. And when we talk about making sure that you call your MPP, it is so essential for anyone who's watching. Please, pick up the phone, write a letter. If you want a sample, we have great examples that you can use. Other people have sent to your MPP. It's to make sure that all the MPPs across the province imagine having unanimous consent to get this bill passed. And that is what we want to see happen in Parliament. When we have the first reading, second reading, third reading, we can have that all happen in just a matter of hours and days if we get all MPPs on board. And that's just what we want to see. This bill, and if I could take one more second to say, this bill looks at combating hate crimes, dismantling white supremacy, and a lot the anti-racism directorate. But one of the critical part of it that I noticed everyone talk about on Advocacy Day, from all of you who attended Advocacy Day the other week, was that we need new tools for young people to understand Islamophobia, and that means education. And that piece of it will be the implementation of it. So this bill is going to be the first critical step, but making sure that we implement it properly, and the regulations are going to be really, really critical part of that as well.
Mustafa, from the optics perspective, as elections are around the corner, NDP presenting this bill, putting pressure on the government, and government approving this bill, credit goes to who? Does it matter? I mean, probably from our perspective may not matter, but from the election perspective, is anybody who's caring about this?
So I'll say this. This bill doesn't belong to any political party. This bill belongs to each member of the Muslim community that stood up after London, came together and said these are changes that need to happen. This bill doesn't belong to NCCM either. This bill belongs to all of you. It is a love song. It is a piece of a promise that was made to us by all of the political leaders, by all the politicians. That's why it has to pass, because it's not about NCCM. This is not called the NCCM Act. It's not called the NDP Act. It's not called the Progressive Conservative Act. It's not called the Liberal Act. This is not about politics. This is about common sense. And this is about the efforts of people like you, Ovais Iqbal, who came to our advocacy day, and so many others, way too numerous to name, who weren't able to make it to our advocacy day, or who have been sitting in their homes praying, waiting for the day that change would come. This is for all of them. Inshallah, we pray that Allah accepts that.
Very good. One last question I have to both of you. I mean, we're talking about Islamophobia. We're talking about strategies to combat. We're talking about this legislation. But in order to also educate our Canadian Muslim population, is there anything you, Brother Mustafa or Doly Begum, you would want to share with the viewers? Are there any actions, or are there any our own behavior which is kind of irritating others? I mean, the other communities, other faith-based people who we share our offices, who we share our tables and so on. Is there anything that we also need to reflect upon?
Maybe I'll answer this very quickly. Which is one, I think we can, our Deen teaches us to be good neighbors, to be kind and gentle to other people, and I think that's something we can always improve on. But I also want to be clear that the family that was walking in London, Brother Muhammad Aslam Zavis was just standing outside the masjid. The people at the Quebec City Mosque, these people weren't doing anything to anybody other than living their lives. And those who want to inflict harm on our community, they don't really care about any of the good things that the Muslim community does. So again, we always have an obligation to try to be better folks, but it is also not our fault when bad things happen.
I think Brother Mustafa said it beautifully. What I can say is, what I find really beautiful is every time these kind of incidents happened, right after that, every imam or every Muslim leader that I've spoken with, one of the things they said was, I pray for the person who committed this, because I pray for their well-being, that may Allah heal them. May Allah give them the peace in mind, because they need that peace. And I think that's the beautiful part about, as Muslims, to make sure that we are, there wasn't hatred against that person. There was sadness and sorrow and grief, but there was an outpouring amount of love. And that love for neighbors and that love for each other is what will get us through this. And I'm really incredibly proud of the Muslim community and the Muslim leaders who have shown that leadership. And I think what we can do is we can just continue to educate one another about how beautiful the religion is, and make sure that we know how to help our young ones to also have that comfort level to talk about the religion in a way that's powerful and that's inclusive, because we're facing a time of Islamophobia where it's hard, and it's hard for our young people as well, young Muslim people. So making sure that we're able to empower them. And I think that will be a really valuable thing for our community.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you very much, Doly and Mustafa, for joining us this afternoon and talking about this upcoming bill in the Parliament, hopefully in February. And we all can celebrate when it's going through the motion and once it's passed, and we can see this bill into action in terms of implementation. Thank you once again for your time. And viewers, the goal of ours tonight here was to give you all the details you wanted to know. I will end the show on this note, as Brother Mustafa mentioned, that our responsibility. So As NCCM, as a lobby organization representing Canadian Muslims, they have done their part. Now it's time for us to do our part. Pick up the phone, talk to your member of provincial parliament, people, those who are watching us from the province of Ontario in Canada, and make sure that you draw their attention and you draw their support. When this bill comes to parliament, we need every MPP to say yes or giving their thumbs up for this bill to pass. And you can also visit NCCM's website, you can see on your screen, and learn more about this legislation, proposed legislation, our London Family Act. With this, please apna khayal rakhiyega. I will see you next week. Assalamu alaikum.
देखिए ई आवाज़ टीवी लाइव तमाम IPTV बॉक्सेस पर पाकिस्तानी या उर्दू सेक्शन में, या हमारी वेबसाइट विजिट कीजिए eawaz.com।
कढ़ाई खानी हो तो सिर्फ कराची की, मसालों से भरी हॉट एंड स्पाइसी सी, कबाब हो बिहारी और निहारी भी, उफ तो फिर मजा आ जाए। कढ़ाई पॉइंट सबको जाना है, कढ़ाई पॉइंट पे ही खाना है। कढ़ाई पॉइंट बिरयानी आ जाए हाथ रुकते नहीं, बटर चिकन से मेरा दिल भरता नहीं, लाहौरी चने और गरम गरम नान, दिल बोले ब्रिंग इट ऑन। कढ़ाई पॉइंट सबको जाना है, कढ़ाई पॉइंट पे ही खाना है। कढ़ाई पॉइंट।
Are you purchasing a new home, looking to get a new mortgage, or renewing your existing mortgage? Kamran Qureshi is here to guide you through the mortgage approval process to get you the lowest available rates in the market. Kamran specializes in residential mortgages for primary or investment properties, refinancing for debt consolidation, serving the community for 17 years. For best mortgage rates and trusted advice, call Kamran Qureshi today at 647-280-6663.